I think the next few days are going to be really interesting because we're going to be finding out whether Highguard's marketing strategy was actually like pure genius or whether they flew too close to the sun. This is a game whose marketing campaign has been very negatively received, but we don't actually know what the game plays like. We don't know if like once it launches, people will play it and they'll be like, actually, this is way better than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, the game launches tomorrow. And for most of the marketing campaign of this game since its announcement, it's basically just been radio silent. But that's recently changed with the developers of Highguard, finally starting to market the game somewhat. So in this video, I'm going to break all of that down and talk about what I think about future prospects or why I think the developers marketed the game the way they did. But yeah, for those who don't know, this is a game that got announced back at the Game Awards 2025 as the very final slot of the awards show that is usually reserved for like the biggest announcements. And yes, it's got developers from Titanfall and Apex Legends, but it's still a brand new studio, a brand new IP that's completely unproven. And this game, as it turns out, is just another hero shooter. Maybe it's going to be really fun when it comes out, but there's a bit of fatigue surrounding that genre, and that's not what people would have liked developers who worked on Titanfall to make. They would have instead preferred, like a spiritual successor to Titanfall. And so that's why this announcement ultimately was met with incredibly negative feedback, with an overwhelmingly negative reception. No matter which trailer you check out, you can see at the likes to dislikes ratio, it's just really brutal. We even learned that the developers of Highguard didn't even pay for that finale slot that is so highly coveted. Instead, Jeff Keighley apparently liked what he played of Highguard so much that he decided to feature it as the Game Awards 2025's finale. And I think there was good intention behind it, but I think ultimately it was a huge mistake. I think because they saved Highguard for last, it ultimately made expectations so sky high, especially after other announcements that felt would have been more appropriate for the finale, like Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic and whatnot. People thought, well, what's bigger than that? And, what's going to be safe for the grand finale? And for it to be like another hero shooter, and for it to come from, like developers who worked on Titanfall, but ultimately made a hero shooter, like that is what I think made people like so quickly dismissive of this title, whereas if it was featured in any other slot, they'd be a little more receptive to it, they'd be willing to give it more of a benefit of a doubt. But yeah, the game comes out tomorrow on January 26, 2026, and we've seen this development studio go radio silent, the development studio being Wildlight Entertainment. We've seen people talking about how, like 3 weeks before launch, we're hearing nothing. 2 weeks before launch, we're hearing nothing. Even 1 week before launch, and we have heard absolutely nothing. But that all changed 3 days prior to launch, which is when they finally started to post again. On January 23rd, 2026, Highguard social media posted the following: tune in on Monday, January 26th at 10 a.m. Pacific for the Highguard launch showcase. Here we'll share an in-depth look at Highguard direct from the studio, featuring a full gameplay deep dive, year one plans, and much more. And then on top of that, they also started posting a countdown for the game's launch. So you can see right here, 3 days remain until the game's launch, and then 2, and then 1. This was published just today. And then on their official YouTube channel, you'll find that Highguard's official launch showcase is ready to go and premiere. And I think what's happening is people are waiting with bated breath to see how this game performs, because the circumstances surrounding it and the marketing of it are all so unusual. People are wondering, can Highguard somehow pull it off? I think that's what we'd all like to see. I think it'd be great if that's how it all ended up playing out. If a game turns out to be much better than we expected, that's a really good thing. But it's hard to say right now whether Highguard stands above and beyond all of the existing hero shooters to a point where it will garner the level of attention at launch that it needs in order to recover from the massively negative marketing and PR campaign that they've experienced. Now, Jeff Keighley seems very confident because just 48 hours before the launch of Highguard, he published the following on Twitter saying, "In 48 hours, I'll be accepting your apologies." Either this tweet will be an all-timer and Jeff Keighley will have the last laugh, or it'll be a catastrophic tweet that people will look back on in mockery due to how wrong it was. I feel like there's no real in between. Pessimism surrounding this game is so high right now that a lot of folks are taking to calling Highguard Concord 2, basically. Another hero shooter that was hyped up to no end, only for it to launch very disappointingly. Now, I don't think Highguard looks anywhere near as boring as Concord did when that was first showcased. I do think Highguard's gameplay and mobility and shooting mechanics and all of those things based on what the trailer showed looks very competently done. But whether it all comes together as a full live service package and whether it ends up being so incredibly appealing that it can get away with this kind of marketing campaign, that remains to be seen. I think Highguard's developers are trying to pull something akin to an Apex Legends, where they really don't offer a whole lot of information prior to launch. They just drop it and hope that people will just play it, and that will speak for itself. But for this marketing campaign to be effective, Highguard has to be that good. And that's where the risk of this lies. If Highguard doesn't meet that quality standard, if it's not this thing that goes viral because of how fun it is, this marketing campaign will end up killing the game. This is an incredibly high-risk, high-reward maneuver that entirely relies on Highguard not only being good, but being great, if not phenomenal. And there's a part of me that wants to think that this speaks to the great confidence that these developers have in Highguard and how fun it'll be and how much traction it'll garner, like positive traction it'll garner once people actually get their hands on the game. And then there's the part of me that's wondering, are they getting overconfident? Are they being too cocky for their own good? And the thing is, like, without playing the game, there's no way for me to say one way or the other. I can only base my opinions off of the one reveal trailer that's been made public. That one trailer alone admittedly did not spark any fires, but, you know, I'm not dismissing the chances of Highguard surprising us. What I am worried about, though, is that Highguard is trying to pull an Apex Legends, but without the conditions that made that marketing campaign for Apex Legends specifically possible. The thing about Apex Legends is that it did come from Respawn, the development studio that did work on the very beloved Titanfall series. The thing about Apex Legends is that when it launched, Battle Royale was still coming into its own and was extremely popular, and the market in that realm wasn't as saturated. Whereas with Highguard, we're coming in as a brand new studio with a brand new IP, with a genre that is now at this point oversaturated, that people have fatigue over. And what Highguard has to do is overcome all of that through sheer quality and through sheer level of fun. And I really hope Highguard can achieve that. But man, if the reception at launch isn't overwhelmingly positive, and if at the end of the day, you know, people do flood into this game and check it out for a while, but it doesn't have a certain level of longevity with its gameplay loop, then we might see good numbers at launch, but it will peter out over time and it might end up dying off. It's such a risky proposition. It requires such a high degree of confidence to pull something like this that part of me is like, maybe they really are that confident. Maybe the game can be that good once we play it and check it out. Like, I've been wrong before about first impressions versus final impressions. And something else that the Highguard developers are relying on is essentially bringing media and creators to this behind closed doors Highguard event. And on Monday, on the day that Highguard launches, we're going to start to see a lot of impressions from a lot of those media outlets and creators who did check the game out and whose NDAs do lift come launch of the game on Monday, tomorrow, January 26, 2026. You can see right here scrolling through Twitter that there are plenty of folks who will straight up talk about how they played Highguard and how they can't wait to talk about it and all of these things. So, I mean, so far from the buzz that I'm seeing from people who have been posting about Highguard, it doesn't seem like the buzz is negative, but at the same time, it's hard to trust those initial, like, oh my God, I attended an event and I can't wait to talk about this game. You know, like, it's hard to just view that as the only metric for whether a game is genuinely good at launch and whether this free-to-play live service genuinely has the legs and longevity to be able to sustain itself. Yeah, I just don't know if the developers really are this confident in Highguard, or whether they had to do like a marketing shift where they had this whole thing planned out, but after how negatively received Highguard was after the Game Awards, they decided that it'd be better to go radio silent, scrap all of their marketing strategies, and let things simmer down so that come launch, they can really show the game off and people can play it instead of like dunking on it without the ability to play it. So I think in a weird way, the way developers decided to stay silent, what ultimately ended up doing was kind of bringing more attention to the game because it was so unusual that people are like, oh, wait, that thing that I forgot about, what's going on with that? And why is there radio silence? It's such an unorthodox way to market the game that it's kind of made people pay attention to Highguard. But what that also means is that if there's any semblance, any like sniff of Highguard just kind of being yet another hero shooter that plays competently enough but doesn't go above and beyond, then like people will be like, oh, well, that didn't pan out too much, and they'll just kind of drift away, and Highguard will drift away with the audience's attention. And I really hope that's not how it plays out. I really hope that Highguard really is far and above what that trailer highlighted and what expectations that set. It'll either be heralded or it'll be like mocked. Like it just feels like from how the social media activity is going on right now, there's no real middle ground for that aspect of things. But I do wish this game well. I always want a game that I'm skeptical about in terms of its ability to perform commercially and critically, to blow me away and to prove me wrong whenever those skepticisms start to come about. I've just seen enough live services flop, especially with the kind of negative reception that it got, like even prior to launch, that I can see the steep hill that this game has to climb, and that has to be acknowledged. People need to be informed about the status of a live service so they know if it's worth spending the amount of like time and money that these live services will demand from you. Because if a live service is ultimately short-lived, then encouraging people to spend time and money on it would kind of be wasting their time and money due to the fact that, whatever investment that they made in this live service will go away in the not so distant future. And once that's gone, it's like you've spent that money on something that no longer exists. But yeah, I'll be keeping a close eye on this, and I wish it the best, and I'll be very curious to see if the way they play their cards will ultimately work out in the end because the game turns out to be that good, or whether the game ultimately will be like fine to good to average to mid, and it'll ultimately be something that will fall off by the wayside and forgotten unceremoniously. But that's one man's take. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on Highguard and, what its potential is in the comments below. Do you think it'll flop? Do you think it'll succeed? Do you think the developers and Jeff Keighley's confidence in this game will be rewarded? Or are they getting too confident for the breaches? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.